Story 1. This is not a Thanos choice. He just eliminated people and life, which did nothing to change human nature or any other underlying factor that caused these issues to exist in the first place. He eliminated half of all life, but humanity has already doubled its population within a generation or two, and other species like insects could do that in a much shorter time frame. Human brains also have a forgetful resilience. Many examples of great tragedy show human society simply moving on. Birth rates rise. People want to feel hopeful and continue with life. In this scenario, it says permanently end these issues, but nothing about how that is accomplished. It could be something like placing everyone into a simulated reality or removing free will. It could be something that fixes the climate forever and always produces a surplus of food and other resources needed to prevent war. It could be a death laser in the sky that kills anyone who takes up arms against their fellow human. I would want to know more. I do not want to end up in a situation like, I have no mouth, and I must scream. Story 2. No, because that sounds like a harmful scenario where you allow the Borg or the Yeerks to take over humanity and erase their free will to make war magically stop. Story 3. I am going to need to know much more about how this functions to even consider such a significant bargain. Story 4. Yes. For those who come after. Joking aside, I would be fine being a villain to ensure everyone and everything was better. The needs of many outweigh the needs of the few, or whatever they say. Story 5. Yes. I think it would be for the greater good. At least those who died did so for something good, like America and our freedom. Story 6. Conflict and struggle have defined human existence since the beginning of time. You cannot have one without the other. Story 7. No. The global deaths from those three diseases amount to about 1.2% over the past 100 years. But the rate is declining, having been much higher decades ago. For instance, due to World War II and other factors, the rate was 4% during the 1930s and 1940s. From 2000 to 2025, it has fallen below 1%. So why would I kill 10 times the number of people who actually die from war, climate, and hunger to solve war, climate, and hunger? Story 8. War, climate change, and world hunger are all products of capitalist greed. That solution would have to make humans care enough about one another to take care of each other. I would gladly be one of the 10% if such a thing were possible. Story 9, without a doubt, not even close. Fixes those issues. Normally, it would require far more than 10%. That is an excellent deal. Story 10. Unfortunately, humanity is only known to expand. That is what it views as positive. Sustainability is not viewed positively. When we add a new lane to a road, is traffic suddenly better? No, we simply fill it with more cars. When a company does well, does it sustain its employees for long-term success? No, it rapidly hires and then eventually has to downsize when success declines. If we found a more efficient and cost-effective way to convert seawater into fresh water, would we suddenly use that to sustain ourselves? No, we would just expand agriculture, thus increasing more brine. Realistically, we are harming 10% of the world to temporarily stop a problem. Story 11. Ending war, climate change, and world hunger by killing 800 million people is not an option. If we do not solve climate change, far more than 800 million people will die. Story 12. This started off as an easy yes, and I was even going to spot you the word painlessly. Then I got to the random part, and it took all the fun away. Story 13. A permanent end to war would require no humans left or brainwashing. I am not going to take that monkey's paw. Story 14. Why euthanize at random? I believe you can find 10% of the population that dislikes living and would prefer to die, especially if cash incentives are offered. Story 15. Sure. I mean, I would make money by having billionaires pay me not to press it for a little bit as I tinker with it and see if I can target it at billionaires or controversial people like Steve Bannon or Alex Jones types. But yes, I would definitely press that eventually. Story 16. No. All of those things are close to ending anyway, and humanity will find something else to replace them with. Story 17. No, because those are loved ones you are killing, and nothing matters more to anyone than their loved ones. Let the world burn as long as I do not lose 10% of my family. A hero will sacrifice you to save the world, but a villain will sacrifice the world to save you. Story 18. I would push the button as many times as it takes until we reach around 1,000 people. That is still enough to maintain genetic variation. Story 19. A sacrifice must be made for the greater good. But I promise I will be fair. Even if I have to suffer, I will press the button and accept the consequences, unless you all bring a time machine. Story 20. If I could permanently end war, climate change, and world hunger, completely unfeasible but okay, I will go with it. I would stop it immediately even if I were one of the 10%. You are absolutely mad if you would not. More than 10% of the population is going to die of starvation in the next 50 years already. Story 21. We could do that now. It might require more than 10%, but if the United States wanted, it could euthanize enough of the world population to end war, hunger, and effectively curb climate change. It would not be at random, and many people would not agree with targeting certain areas to solve these problems. However, clearly, no one cares enough, or perhaps everyone cares too much, to actually do it. Otherwise, it would have been done. Story 22. To me, the answer is an obvious no, because 10% of all the people I love is just too high a cost. As the question stands now, the answer is easy for me. It would start to get harder at 1%. Story 23. Very likely, because the wars and starvation caused by climate change-induced biome alteration to what is currently agricultural land are likely to kill substantially more than 10% of the world population, and not at all painlessly. I would submit to the judgment of the law for this mass murder and accept whatever penalty they give me for such a monstrous crime, but I would not regret doing it, since from what we can tell right now about the likelihood of capitalist civilization ever fixing these things without bloodshed, not doing it is also a monstrous crime. Story 24. No, because I don't believe that it would work, and there are better ways to address the issue without killing people. I might toss the person who brought me the choice off a cliff, though. You don't kill 10% of people on the planet and get world peace. You get a bunch of people intent on making everyone suffer. The question is basically a load of nonsense. What would you do with this false premise? I see the Thanos wannabe comments. Basically, the Nazis thought if they got rid of a certain type of people, the world would be a better place. Killing 10% of people randomly still makes you Nazi-like. If that's who you are, may you evolve or may your threads end. Story 25. How long will they last? If it stops on a Tuesday, can Russia invade Ukraine on Wednesday? Hunger is caused by too many people living in a place without enough food. If there are no starvation deaths for a year, what happens the next year with the increased population but the same or worse harvest? The answer is yes, but 10% of the world population is 800 million, and only about 9 million people die annually due to hunger, while about 500,000 people die from war. You would need to prevent more than 10 years' worth of deaths to solve these issues. For how long? Story 26. Okay, I probably would not press the button, but I am curious about the mathematics of pressing the button versus not pressing it. How many people would benefit and so on? Especially since pressing the button also means that a significant number of planes are about to lose their pilots, power plants will lose the people maintaining safety, and 10% of all cars driving right now are about to crash. Story 27. Without even blinking, I would lean back as humanity scrambles to find something to report on and predict doom about in the following months. Story 28. Completely at random. No, I might be one of that 10%. If someone is not willing to sacrifice themselves for this, they will not sacrifice others for this. Story 29. Absolutely. I would choose 5% from the extreme left and extreme right. Yes, Reddit would become a ghost town, but that is a risk I am willing to take. Story 30. No, that would be murder. I cannot murder 10% of the population for my own benefit. I would be all about finding 10% worth of volunteers, because when you volunteer for the bad thing to happen to you so others get a benefit, that is when it is a sacrifice instead of murder. Story 31. Not pressing the button is tantamount to adding war, climate change, and world hunger to the future. That would kill far more than 800 million people, and it would not be painless. In contrast, having 800 million die painlessly is the obvious choice. Story 32. Sure, but what about fixing the environmental damage already done, the plastics, the rainforest destruction, and all kinds of other problems? Nothing will stop dictators and fools from rising to power and hurting their own country, let alone declaring war and attacking another. It has been said that even if we stopped all greenhouse gases today, we still could not stop severe climate change in the future because the runaway changes have already started. Story 33. An ethical question with a clear answer. If it is truly random, you also risk being part of that 20%, so you are willing to sacrifice yourself as well. Only a sociopath would say no, because you are sacrificing just 800 million to make life infinitely better for the remaining 7.2 billion. Story 34. No. Why would I want to harm 10% of all people just to solve problems that mostly do not affect people important in my life? Do you honestly think I would accept 10% of my family dying just to help poor people in Africa? Not a chance. My family comes before everyone else. Story 35. Yes. Every time, all day, I would press it twice just to make sure. Everyone knows you cannot make an omelet without harming a few people. Story 36. I would like to meet an ethical system that would not press this button for 800 million people to save trillions of lives. I would condemn half the population to SCP-2718 for this. For those who do not know, SCP-2718 is the phenomenon where, once you learn about it, it overwrites your afterlife. You would have gone to heaven, but not anymore. By reading this, you are doomed to be conscious in your corpse, feeling the maggots eating you for eternity. Story 37. Depends. What happens to the dead bodies? You thought COVID-19 was a corpse disaster with 0.1% lethality? Here comes the apocalypse. Story 38. Let's change it and have the button remove anyone who does not think those issues are worth solving. Story 39. My math is poor, but isn't 10% of 8 billion people 800 million? Notwithstanding how many people die in wars, when you consider the psychosocial damage to people that war causes and the environmental damage, I think killing 100 million people to permanently end war is an easy decision. Our next war could very well include an element of nuclear war. Story 40. There is always an unintended consequence, and it is a slippery slope. Is 15% dead acceptable to save 85%? 25% dead? What if inaction leads to a reset that seems positive for the survivors? In the end, this kind of question is a mental exercise between logic and emotion with binary responses. Story 41. I would do it for 99%. The reasoning is that it will affect only 0.001% of people who will ever live on the earth. It will also greatly increase the probability that some form of immortality technology will be achieved. I also just finished watching Utopia. Story 42. 10% is not bad at all. Just have to hope the essential people who pass on knowledge are intact, like the one person who makes scientific glass springs. Story 43. No. Regardless of what we think about the state of the world today, a very small number of people, historically speaking, die from any of these three causes. Sure, there is suffering, but suffering is always relative and does not usually erase joy completely. You cannot just decide that killing people is better overall. Story 44. No. We have to learn from our species' history and problems by our own choice, not as an escape. The universe will eliminate us without care, and because of that, our species' survival depends on us as a whole. If we cannot figure it out, we do not deserve to exist as highly intelligent beings among all. That is 800 million people just dead. No, not a single thing could justify that. Story 45. I would, yes, call it future-proofing. 10% of the current population dies, but the extinction of our and other species is delayed long enough for us to escape this planet before nature takes us out on its own. Make no mistake. Even without climate change and war, our days on this planet are numbered. It will eventually become uninhabitable. Story 46. Sure, I would probably be one of the 10%, and I am fine with that. I would not need to face the fallout of the sudden disappearance of the world's problems. People will not be so distracted by the world ending or someone in Africa starving, so you should finish your plate. People will now focus on the 1% who keep raising prices to line their pockets. The corporations that exploit their workers by giving the bare minimum wage but expecting the work of 10 people. Story 47. If I did it, I would need to be part of that 10%. No way could I live in utopia knowing I caused so much sacrifice. Story 48. I would press it twice if it meant this reality would stop resurfacing, yes, even if I was one of the 20%. Story 49. Climate change is already permanently ending world hunger. A doubling of atmospheric carbon dioxide is leading to an estimated 35% increase in crop yields across the board and to better drought resistance of plants. Story 50. No, you do not know if you are affecting a future great leader or genius. We are not an advanced society, so to an advanced one, climate change is probably a quick fix. You cannot permanently do anything because impermanence is the only permanence in the universe. Hunger is a major issue because scarcity is a byproduct of Western racism. Story 51. Yes, as long as those who have severe drug addiction and inescapable mental illness that relentlessly torture their souls are included as well. Story 52. No. Or at least we would need some heavy qualifications and clarifications. Like no war? A foreign power comes in and starts rounding up minorities to put in camps, and we cannot fight back? No climate change? Does that mean we get fusion power? Or does it mean all the factories shut down and everyone starves and dies of treatable diseases because we cannot drive anywhere? No world hunger? So the warlords and dictatorships that currently disrupt the distribution of food, which is the largest reason for world hunger, have to mysteriously disappear, but definitely not due to war, which is now banned. If this is magic solving all of our problems by fundamentally changing human nature, then sure, probably. If this is the button forcing world leaders to make hard decisions, I will pass. Those decisions are hard because of the consequences, not because people are greedy. Story 53. Yes. Press the button twice. But wouldn't it be better to eliminate the 10% worst people instead of randomly? This would guarantee an end to all wars. Story 54. The person who pushes that button has to be the one to die painfully after personally telling everyone selected for euthanasia and facing their judgment. The person who pushes that button is essentially condemned to hell, personally tortured by everyone they killed, and should be remembered by the living as the one who betrayed the people for easy salvation. It is better instead to offer the whole world a choice to offer up their own lives and see if 10% volunteer. That said, the salvation you are describing is possible, but with the ratio reversed, only 10% get to survive. Story 55. This is more of an extreme take on a famous family of philosophical questions called the trolley problem. Technically, only some of them involve trolleys, and many variations have been introduced over the years. Most people instinctively avoid taking action that saves some at the expense of a smaller number. This classic instinctual response rejects an ancient Talmudic tradition called Shev V'al Ta'aseh, literally translated as sit and don't act. This is a Jewish legal and ethical framework that, in many situations of ethical quandary, holds that it is better to fail through an action than to fail through a positive act, though it did not always apply. Story 56. No, because this is definitely a monkey's paw wish. You can tell that by the inclusion of permanently ending war, along with the other two. Climate change? Sure. Some advanced alien civilization gives us greenhouse gas scrubbers that work on a massive scale and allow us to control our atmosphere at a granular level, as well as some near-infinite energy source. Hunger? Same as above. You could use technology to solve that and have a post-scarcity society. But war? How do you stop war permanently without removing free will? Humans are warlike, and to stop that you need to change not just the world, but people themselves. Wars might lessen in this post-scarcity society, but they will never fully disappear without something horrendously dystopian happening. Story 57. The consideration of one aspect of this would stay my hand, which is how the exclusion of all of these conflicts would affect the progression of our species. Competition against adversity, as well as one another, has proven to be a powerful catalyst throughout our dominion. Story 58. I would not do it even if there were 0% that needed to be euthanized, without understanding how all these terrible things are ended and how it is permanent without taking away free will. Story 59. Yes, I think I would. But I would also ask to be in that 10% that was euthanized. No way I could live with killing so many and surviving myself. Story 60. If your world hunger solution results in only insects remaining, people will regret the decision, and the 10% will have the last laugh. At the end of the day, we are nobodies, and no one will know who initiated it. Therefore, the person who did still actually saved someone, so there is no need to worry about eliminating 10%. Besides, it is not like you had to kill them manually. If you did, it would probably take years and cause regret due to boredom. Story 61. War, climate change, and hunger will affect more than 10% of the world's population over the next 25 years, and it will not be painless. I do not know. Maybe. Actually, no. That is too big of a decision for one person to make. Story 62. I would. The Earth is full anyway. Plus, if we reduce the population by 10%, there would be fewer people competing for resources such as food and housing. Story 63. The politicians who start wars are not random people. The corporations that cause environmental impacts on climate change are not random people. The corrupt government that does nothing and allows their own citizens to starve are not random people. Killing 10% of people randomly does nothing to solve these issues because the ones causing them in the first place are still alive and well. Also, this is clearly a post by a bot account to farm karma, so it is meaningless. Story 64. I am already very aware of my inevitable death, and I know I have lived in a way that I will be proud of myself no matter what. If it is painless, I might even volunteer to give my own life to save one additional person. That kind of outcome is extraordinary and would leave a permanent mark on human history. The only issue is that it would not prevent the same systems in place today from reforming and producing the same problems. Story 65. If you press the button, you solve a problem. But pressing the button would also cause a problem. Is there a downside to this? Story 66. Absolutely. Progress for humanity at a species level like that would be worth far more than just 10% of the current population. Story 67. I do not need to know the entire situation. Knowing half is sufficient for me to proceed and let fate determine the outcome. Story 68. Average year, approximately 3.5 million people die due to the three causes listed above. World hunger impacts approximately 9% of the world population each year. It would be immoral to not push the button. Story 69. Do not forget that by eliminating 10%, you risk killing at least one loved one for potentially all the survivors. There would be very few exceptions, probably. Story 70. I would. The simple truth is that I do not find the trolley problem to be a dilemma. I aspire towards a better world, and if it could be achieved in an instant, I would take it. The reality of the situation, when you break it down, is simple. You remove 10% of the current world's population, but you trade that in exchange for an improvement to the quality of life for the remaining 90% of all humanity alive right now, and every living soul that will exist in the future. With the improved quality of life, the 10% lost will be rapidly replaced. For anyone wanting to make an argument about the irreplaceable nature of human life, nature already takes many of us because of war, climate change, hunger, and poverty. If the only time you feel that weight is when it is in your hands, you do not deserve a seat at the table for this discussion. Every life we lose today is a waste of our potential as a species. Story 71. Sure, people make mistakes and we decide what is right and wrong, yet still choose to do wrong every day. Humanity will have to take its chance on something new. Story 72. Permanently change those three things? Zero hesitation. Let's not even get into the pure numbers that war itself kills alone. I am getting sick of all these petty wars over absolutely insane ideologies, egos, and fanaticism. Story 73. Nope. There is no easy way out. We collectively let this happen. We collectively need to figure it out or suffer the consequences. Story 74. No, because it would almost certainly involve taking away free will. Alternatively, what if it did that by painfully ending the lives of the other 90%? That seems suspicious. Story 75. 10% of the world is too much to eliminate without some sort of merit system. War, climate change, and world hunger would likely cause fewer deaths than the snap would. Story 76. decimate humanity to extend the planet's life, bring about world peace, and provide enough food for everyone? Where is the button? I will press it in a heartbeat. Story 77. War, climate change, and world hunger are not killing 10% of the world population right now. Therefore, statistically speaking, it makes no sense to press the button. Story 78. We already do something far worse. Every single year, humans kill the equivalent of Earth's entire population. Trillions of sentient beings are murdered needlessly, not to save the world, but for taste, habit, convenience, and profit. We forcibly breed animals into existence, abuse them, impregnate them through artificial insemination, confine them, mutilate them, exploit their bodies, and then kill them as if they were objects. We treat sentient, living, feeling beings like products, slaves, and objects, even though we could easily live vegan and thrive. Before we entertain hypothetical moral dilemmas, we should first face the reality of what we already allow and normalize every single day. Story 79. Yes, humanity's four biggest problems are solved: war, climate change, world hunger, and overpopulation to a degree. Story 80. It would need to be a lot more than 10% in order to avoid causing widespread famine in the future. I believe that to achieve this, at least 50% of the population would need to be eliminated today. Story 81. Sure, I don't care. Over 50% of the population is just not very intelligent anyway. There is a good chance of getting rid of at least a few. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.